This story belongs to the medieval times. When there used to be kingdoms in India, there were infamous gangs of thugs known as dacoits and or bandits. They used to rob innocent travellers on isolated roads, many times often killing them. The kingdom of Marathas, now known as Maharashtra state of India, were frustrated by one of such notorious gangs of dacoits consisting of 5 to 6 members and had a bounty on them. So this dacoits had a big loot one day and decided to take a refuge in an old house called the Wada, an old house structure mainly popular in Maratha community, and split the loot. The Wada was situated slightly out of an abandoned village in the middle of the jungle, and the area was avoided by other nearby villagers due to the haunting stories, a perfect hideout for the dacoits to pass the night. But it was not just an ordinary night, it was Amavasya, a new moon night. It is said in India that most of the paranormal activities are enhanced on this day. On top of that, it was raining. All in all, a deep, dark night. The dacoits were happy and celebrating their victory. Some of them were even drinking in one of the inner rooms of the Wada, with one single oil lamp for light. As the night was slowly passing by, during their conversations and laughing and arguments, some of them started hearing a very low and strange voice of a lady singing. The song was something of a lori, kind of Indian lullaby which mother sings. But they ignored it, as they first thought they were just hallucinating due to alcohol, or it's just the raindrops, or simply night creatures making weird noises. So they continued their talking, but after a while, the voice of the song became prominent. Even the one who didn't drink started hearing the voice. So 2 of them went to check the house with a hunch of someone might be spying on them, but they found nothing. At last, all of them came to a conclusion that they are just hallucinating, and started their little party again. The celebration slowly started to grow into arguments as to who will keep what. The greed started playing its part. The argument started to turn into conflict, and the voices of them arguing started to break the eerie, deep, silent night. When all of a sudden, out of nowhere, a loud noise of a small baby crying came from a deep, dark room around the corner. All the dacoits who almost drew their weapons to fight froze. All of them started looking at each other, shaking with fear, and one of the gang members indicated their leader with the eyes of, "What do we do?" The leader, the man in his 50s, a hardcore criminal with nothing to fear attitude, not knowing of the situation he was facing, snapped out of it and shouted angrily, "Who's there? Come out, or we'll come over and kill you and drink your blood." For a moment, all the dacoits holding their weapons, staring hard to see if they can find someone out in that room, got some courage because of their leader's words. The 2 of them who checked the Wada earlier and who happened to miss out on that one single room, looked at each other and decided to check the room from which the voice came. But as soon as they took 1 or 2 steps towards it, the cry of a little child started again. This time more prominent, and strikingly, all of a sudden, an angry loud voice of a lady came from that room. "How dare you wake my child up? Don't you see my child is trying to sleep? Get out of my Wada." It was at this moment all of them realised that they have disturbed something more sinister, something which they cannot kill with their mere weapons. All of them went into flight mode and started running in whichever direction they could. One of them died on the spot due to shock. All of them started shouting loudly in panic, "Help, Mother Kali, Indian goddess, help, help us." The cry was the same as their victims would during the loots, as if karma had come back to bite them. All of them running into different directions due to panic and lost their way to the exit of the Wada. With no lamps to navigate or any source of light whatsoever, a simple big old rusty house became a maze for them, but somehow they managed to escape. One of them who knew the nearby village somehow managed to reach there. Coincidentally, a unit of soldiers who were tracking the dacoits were in the same village. They caught him immediately, or rather, this terrified thug who was wounded all over due to cuts and bruises because of running into the jungle crazily, surrendered immediately. Shaking with fear, The dacoit told all the incident to the soldiers, even though it was a good opportunity for the soldiers to track and catch them all by the night. They decided not to. I feel like a lot of the time this subreddit is flooded with all these negative experiences, so I thought I should talk about George. Initially, me and George did not get along very well. He was pretty restless and would often stomp around upstairs, opening and closing drawers and opening them, slamming shut doors. Usually when I was either in my room, also upstairs, or downstairs in the living room. It often would be so obvious I would have to grab my baseball bat or a knife to go through the house to check for intruders. After quite a few times of this happening, I gradually realised this was the work of something else. I'm no stranger to paranormal experiences, but I hadn't dealt with something this explicit, particularly during the day as it so often was, although he did have his fun at night. Eventually it got to the point where I was getting irritated. I was watching TV downstairs when, again, the door to the master bedroom slammed shut and drawers started to open and close alongside stomping. I'd been downstairs for a few hours, so I knew it wouldn't be a burglar or intruder. Called out saying something along the lines of, "I've no problem with you being in this house, but you've seriously got to chill out. If you're cool with me, then I'm cool with you." And the noises from upstairs immediately stopped. I would still hear him every now and then, but it had largely calmed down. Maybe some kind of frustration with not being acknowledged. I'm not going to try and guess. I don't know when I decided to start calling him George, but I got that sense that he approved of the name. Sometimes I could feel his presence in a room, especially when alone, and he's not particularly fond of my dogs. He hasn't done anything to them. And when I could feel him in a room when I was with my dogs, they were very cautious and would watch where I'm guessing he was in the room. Usually when he was close, there's a kind of static in my vision. I've since moved from that house for university, and to my surprise, George came with me. Although he largely leaves me alone, I still hear him from time to time. He has, however, picked up the habit of annoying my roommate. Moving things into completely different rooms, turning off appliances, taking his bookmark out of books that he's reading, and a few other things that I can't really remember. I'm about to move again and can't help but feel sad at the thought that George won't come with me, as it's almost comforting knowing he's around. I feel like maybe he's now attached himself to my roommate. Anyways, moral of the story is, if you have a thumping, meddling spirit ghost, maybe they're just after a bit of company. Amicable coexistence can be possible. When I was a kid, I saw ghosts, but not through a third eye or anything, but directly in front of me. Sometimes they were see-through, hooded figures coming out of my closet, masses standing by doorways. But the time I remember most clearly is when I was 4. I woke up in the morning and it must have been 9 or 10 a.m. It was very bright in my room. The rocking chair to the side of my bed had an old woman in it. She was rocking slowly. I wasn't scared. I thought she was my grandma. She asked if I wanted lemonade. I said yes. I heard my mum's footsteps coming to my room, and she just vanished. I cried and asked if grandma was coming back, but mum said grandma wasn't there. My 3-year-old sister followed her dad outside during a rainstorm and managed to open the deadbolt there, but that's another story. From then on, I always felt things. Saw people on the side of the road in cloaks. The one that is still currently plaguing me is the demon dream. I was 10 in a different house built in 1910, so not crazy old, I guess. I was probably 11, and in the dream I was waiting for one of those big steamboats with the wheels on the side of a marsh with my 5th grade class. Everything was grey and there was a fog on the ground. I turned around and there was a man. I never got to look at his face, just this black coat maybe. I knew it wasn't supposed to go with him. Everything in my body screamed to get out on the goddamn boat. But I didn't. As soon as I took his hand, we were sitting on my couch in the living room. He sat there in silence and stared at me. I still couldn't look at his face. Then I got a sick feeling. I don't know how or why, but I knew it was a demon. I said, "You're a demon in Jesus' name. Get out of my house." Everything shook so hard I woke up. I can't explain it, but it felt like a door was open, like there was a draft. I sat up and something shoved me down hard. I stayed in bed until morning. These dreams continue to this day, always in that room. They're different than any dream I ever have. Sometimes it includes my family members, but it's never really them. Why I may be crazy, my dad was a drinker, very eccentric, but he never lied, he hated it. He said he had demons in his dreams too. Things would fly off shelves and sometimes he would hear things. I was abused a lot as a kid and had a lot of anxiety and depression. After my teen years, I couldn't see them anymore, but sometimes it feels like I'm in a crowded room when I'm alone at home, and sometimes like there is this silent screaming. I still have the dreams. Sometimes I see them from the corner of my eye, but not vividly like before. I avoid all religion, it just makes it worse. I'm not a skeptic, but maybe I'm not a believer either. A few years ago, I was going through a really hard time. My friend worked at a crystal shop in Austin and brought me to a party there one night. There was an intuitive doing readings that my friend said was amazing. I'm a Christian and I'm torn about tarot cards, but I decided to sit down with the psychic anyways, since my friend had known her for a long time. The woman ended up not even getting to my card reading because when she touched or looked at my hand, she started freaking out. She said I have the strongest empathetic abilities she has ever encountered and continued on nervously to make sure I was okay. Up until that point, the reading was spot on, and when she said that, so many things started making sense, and it truly made life easier for a while knowing that I wasn't crazy, and all of the emotions I'm experiencing a day while doing hair aren't only coming from me. I was struggling because all day, every day, I was taking on all of my clients' inner turmoil. And this is why life had become so hard, exhausting, and almost unbearable. Fast forward to a year later, I was heartbroken and fell into addiction. Soon after, I started having extreme poltergeist activity. Things started flying off the walls and across rooms, faces in every photo I took, ceilings opening up and bugs falling out. No one wanted to be at my house because they were all terrified of the ghosts. I've since gotten sober and don't experience anything negative anymore, but I've done a lot of research on the subject. I'm making this post to find out if y'all think that the poltergeist activity could have been coming from my brain and my emotions as opposed to an actual spirit. I know paranormal scientists are starting to believe this activity can be caused by a living person. I think the negative way I was living probably did attract some negative spirits as well. But I can't stop wondering if being an empath and having all of that emotional energy is what sometimes creates a poltergeist. I want to preface this by saying that this happened as an encounter for my husband, and as a sort of sleep paralysis for me. We're in the process of moving out of our home. He got a teaching job elsewhere in the States, and they're doing in-person learning now, and the 3+ hour drive to get there just isn't practical anymore. Last week, he was cleaning some shower tiles, and 2 of them broke off, revealing crumbled sheetrock. This house was not built to code. He told me that a few days ago, he saw that he could only describe as a cross between Samara from The Ring and cousin It from the Addams Family, just standing there in the bedroom, less than 5 feet away from him. Coming up to his about chest height, he's 6 foot. He walked right through it, a little further into this vacuum cleaner. We've been sleeping on top of the covers the past few nights because it's been too hot to sleep under them. I don't know if I was already asleep, starting to fall asleep or what the case was, but I remember looking on the doorway out of the room and seeing a figure that had the same features, same height as what my husband saw. The difference is, it made a grabbing motion with its hand, palm inward. Of course, I got startled, and slid under the covers and didn't look again for the rest of the night. This isn't the first encounter I've had with ghosts. Our dearly departed dog is still among us and makes his presence known with his snoring. However, this is the first time I've seen a human-like ghost, clearly, and not just as a mind trick. I also want to mention that I was working for a client for a few weeks in her home, and she told me about a ghost in her closet that grabs all of the female caregivers if they don't enter the closet with caution. Apparently, the last tenant in her house hung himself in the closet. I took note of what she said, and always knocked and greeted before entering, stating my purpose. I'm not aware of any backstory to our residence. Is there any explanation for what has or is happening here? My husband is thinking that maybe it's unhappy with us leaving. I just don't want to be afraid to fall asleep if there's no cause for alarm. I recently moved into a new apartment. An old military barracks from the Civil War that was turned into an apartment. And I've seen several spooky things. I don't want to make this too long, so I'll cut to the chase. Out of the corner of my eye, I have seen black figures walking around out of my bathroom. A male figure poking his head around the corner of my door. A gentleman who just sits at the window, and one in my closet. The one in my closet physically gives me the shakes, as he's the only one out of the figures I've seen that gives me the feeling of being unsafe. The apartment itself is set on a giant field, the literal battlefield of my city where the Civil War happened, and my parents say the figures I'm seeing are likely soldiers who died an early death. I've spoken my concerns to my father, who's a retired 82nd Airborne guy, and he claims when he lived in the barracks he saw all kinds of things like this, and that no one ever got hurt. However, with the following things I'm going to list, I'm questioning my safety. Again, it's just one in my closet who frightens me. I moved in with 2 cats who refused to go anywhere near the closet, and when the door was open, they hissed at the closet several times. I had put their food bowl and water bowl outside the closed closet door, and they refused to go near it. I moved the bowls and tried to put their litter near it, but again, they refused to go near it. They've since been transferred to my sister's house because they wouldn't stop yelling, meowing insanely loud all night. I also own 2 TVs. When I moved out, I received my parents' TV on top of mine, and the one that is plugged into the wall close to the closet door, within a few inches, constantly turns itself on and off, changes channels, and sometimes goes to static. Every other electronic in my house is perfectly fine. The closet just gives off this awful energy, and everything that goes near it seems to malfunction or just hate being there. I'm unsure what to do. I'd like to add I have made a friend in the apartment complex, and she claims to see things as well. However, there's another figure that I didn't mention here because I don't see a reason to, but for those sticklers who are going to ask, across the field, outside my window, is a lady in a pitch black dress hanging and swinging from a tree. The friend claims she's never seen that figure across the field, but I can see the figure clearly from my window. I'm on the top 4th floor where my dad and landlord both claim generals would meet at random times. Sometimes at night, but very rarely, it's usually midday or around noon. When I was 8 years old, my family moved from my original childhood home into a 120-year-old house with a lot of history. It was a beautiful house, but there had been a big fire in it many years ago, and it was abandoned for 15 years. I really didn't like the house when we first moved. The energy felt off, and I felt like I was constantly being watched. There were certain rooms where the energy felt so off, I refused to go in there alone. We also ended up moving my bedroom after 1 or 2 years because I hated the energy in the room and I couldn't explain it to anyone. My parents wrote these feelings off as just being a scared 8-year-old, but the feelings about specific rooms maintained until we moved out when I was 18. A lot of strange occurrences happened during the 10 years I lived in this house. So much so that in high school, I started to wonder if I could be schizophrenic. Even though these occurrences happened exclusively at home, and since moving, I haven't experienced anything. I was constantly seeing things out of the corner of my eye or hearing footsteps when I was home alone, but I'm going to share two experiences that really stand out in my memory. For my 13th or 14th birthday, I had a few girlfriends sleep over in the living room. Some of them had never been to my house before, and I didn't tell them anything about it because I just wanted everyone to have a good time and not feel spooked. The next morning, one friend asked why my dad was walking in between our sleeping bags for a while last night. I immediately knew that wasn't my dad. My parents went up to bed while we were still awake, and my dad confirmed he didn't get up in the night. My friend didn't particularly want to sleep over after that first night. Another experience that I vividly remember happened when I was coming home from a party in high school. It was after midnight, but I was definitely sober because I drove that night. I was entering the back door that was in the backyard and opened into the kitchen. We never used the front door. As I was putting my key in the door, I looked through the glass pane of the door. The view went straight through the kitchen and into the hallway near the front of the house. At one side of the hallway wall in view was a full-length mirror hanging up. In the brief few seconds I was looking through the glass on the door, I saw a very distinct, solid-looking figure run out of the mirror. It looked like it was in the position that sprinters are in when they crouch down to start a race, and it looked like it was wearing a royal blue morph suit. Weird, but I saw what I saw. The figure ran out of the mirror and dissipated into the staircase on the other side of the hallway. After seeing that, I could remember booking it to my bedroom, closing the door, and falling asleep with the lights and TV on. All of that being said, I believe whatever was in my house wasn't malicious. We took good care of the house, and I like to think that the spirits appreciated us for that. At the time of this, I was working for a private security company and we were working on an event at Carisbrooke Castle on the Isle of Wight. There were probably 10 or 15 of us scattered across the darkened castle in winter. It was really early in the morning, probably around 1 or 2 a.m, and a colleague and I picked the short straw of doing the perimeter walk where there is no light, not even from streetlights nearby. So we have to do laps of the entire castle, along the wall with the moat on our right hand side in near darkness, bar our torches that we carried. As we approached the second lap, near the longest stretch of the wall, I noticed footsteps in the dark that weren't ours. We stopped a few times to check out this noise, but we couldn't pin it down to anything. And it could have been an animal moving in the dark. The next stage happened all in a few seconds, not really quick enough for us to respond. In the darkness, I noticed the figure of a man walking towards me. He was walking up from the moat right at us. As he approached, he said something along the lines of, "Alright, right Greeley." He then walked straight past us into the solid 12-foot tall rock wall. In a state of shock, my colleague and I just confirmed to each other we'd just seen someone walk into a solid wall and vanish. Not gone over, not walked past, but directly into. We raised the alarm for an insider, but after a site search, we never found anything of this guy who walked up the slope. I feel like this needs background information, so here goes. I've been a Christian all my life, albeit not always practicing as I should, and had never really had any encounters with or interest in the paranormal. I have 2 children which I had quite young, and lived a mostly normal life up until I turned 22, when my girlfriend baby mama and I moved back into my childhood home, a small rundown shack in the middle of the woods of Maine. Nearest full-time neighbours lived like a mile away. This home was surrounded on 3 sides by thick, dense forests, and on one side, the forest was actually a state university tree farm, so the trees were all planted in creepily perfect rows. At 22, I found out I had Chiari malformation type 2, and it required surgery to correct. At this point in my life, both of my children were already born, but not very old. My oldest was almost 2, and my youngest was only a few months old. They scheduled the brain decompression surgery for August 13th, 2013, and initially, it all went well. However, we found out a few days later that the brain shell Jora patch they had put on during surgery had ruptured, and they had to go in and fix it. No big deal, right? Except they botched that surgery too, and I ended up with a staph infection in my brain. This leads to a third surgery. I promise, I'm getting to the supernatural stuff, but this background setting feels important to me. During the third surgery, I died on the table, was brought back, and then spent 4 days floating between life and death in the ICU. According to the doctors, I shouldn't have made it. They were telling my parents to notify the rest of the family that they needed to come see me now or forever hold their peace when I sat upright in bed to say hello to my parents, girlfriend and children. Something in me changed that day, and I still don't know exactly what it is. I managed to make it out of the ICU and was stuck at home tethered to an IV pole with a PICC line for 8 weeks of serious antibiotic treatment to stop the staph infection in my brain. Skip ahead to Christmas Eve of 2013. I'm having a small party with some friends of mine. My girlfriend baby mama had taken the kids to her parents' house so they wouldn't have to deal with a bunch of drunk young adults. I don't drink and didn't dare to do this soon after the surgeries, but my friends were typical young 20s. She calls me at 9 o'clock that night to tell me she wasn't coming back, and neither were the kids. We were done. This was the beginning of 4 full years of isolation in this house, with nobody and nothing to talk to except those 4 walls, a mile away from the nearest human beings. And me, being still practically fresh out of surgery with a year of expected recovery time still to go. I couldn't drive at the time, and couldn't for about 2 years afterwards. After that night, I find myself having vivid dreams of things that would come true over 80% of the time. And I found that I have knowledge of things I should not have known. Details about other people's private lives. I was able to sense motives and had intimate knowledge of how to solve problems, both personal and otherwise, that I had no experience with and should not have known. Obviously, this scared me quite a bit, since there are only so many sources of these gifts related to my Christian faith, and most of them are demons. I still to this day think I was or am possessed in some fashion, like some symbiotic relationship with whatever crept in after God saved my life in the hospital. I've sought help, but have found none, so I've pretty much just accepted it at this point and tried to use the gifts for good. However, this is only the precursor to the point of this post. All was well for about 2 years of this isolation. I had made peace with my unhappiness and the silence of being totally alone, and was beginning to settle in. I'd gotten to the point where I would often lay on my lawn and gaze at the stars, or have a little fire in my fire pit till I was too tired to keep feeding it. I was completely comfortable. It was around this time that I had really started researching the paranormal, trying to identify what might be the source of my newfound gifts, and had fallen down the rabbit hole into all kinds of cryptids, my favourite among them being the skinwalker. One evening, I'd gone to the local store just before dark to get some smokes and basic grocery stuff, because food is life, right? And I arrived back at my home after dark. It was a fairly well-lit night, stars and a partial moon. I could see everything in my yard. There was nothing out of the ordinary. Everything seemed fine. As soon as I shut my car off, I was overcome with an overwhelming sense of dread and immediate danger. I fought the panic for a few seconds, but it bested me pretty quickly, and I made the dash to my porch as quickly as I could. It was maybe 30 feet from where I parked. I flicked the porch light on and stood there, scanning the tree line for anything that might have caused this. There was nothing there. Nothing at all. Now, the woods in Maine are quite lively day and night. There are all kinds of wildlife noises at all times day and night. But not this night. There was no sound at all. So I noped the fuck off my porch and went straight inside, locked the door behind me, and tried to calm the sense of panic. Every night for the next 2 years until I was in a position to finally move out, it was the same. The woods would be lively during the day, but as soon as the sun went down, you could hear a pin drop on the grass from 50 yards away, and it was always coupled with that same overriding sense of dread and panic, to the point where I put a deadbolt on both front and back doors and stormed shutters to keep whatever it was out. I'm convinced that something followed me home that day, and whatever it was, it stayed. I wonder if it was drawn to whatever energy I'd been putting out since my run in with death. But thankfully, it hasn't found where I live now. Yet. I do not scare easily. I'm a big burly man who hunts and just generally isn't someone that people go out of their way to fuck with. But whatever it was, made me feel totally helpless every night for 2 full years. I've sought help, but nobody seems to have any answers. So I'm here asking for your help. Who was stalking me for those 2 years? And what happened to me in hospital? I was taking my mother-in-law's chihuahua out to go to the bathroom. She has a brain tumour that made her equilibrium very off, so she tends to run in these little circles. Well, this time, her little circle turned into a big circle, where she kept avoiding the tree as a whole, which was odd because she usually prefers doing her business right under the tree. Mind you, the tree's pretty huge, so being under the branches is pretty hard to avoid. So she wobbles all the way over to the side of the house, completely avoiding the tree. Then it seemed when she was under the tree, she'd be in a bit of panic. I had no idea why. I assumed it had something to do with her tumour getting worse. I know her vision was going, so I assumed she just couldn't see where she was going. Anyways, so I tried putting her in a normal spot, a spot under the tree on the left side of it, and she kept running away from it and going to the side of the house. So I just followed her over there. A chill shot down my spine when I walked under the tree, and I tried not to think anything of it. I waited for her to do her business, and then started to guide her with my voice back to the back porch. She was very hesitant, almost like something was stopping her from going. So of course, I picked her up. I set her down right in front of the front porch by the side of the tree one more time to see what she'd do. She basically froze, so I knelt down again to pick her up, and I felt a drop of what I assumed to be water hit my forehead. It had rained earlier that day, so I wasn't surprised that a water droplet fell from one of the higher branches. I picked her up and turned to go inside. Then my partner came outside with one of our cats in their arms. We like to bring them out in our arms, sometimes so they could smell the fresh air and all that. I started talking to them about how the dog was behaving, and then we noticed our cat looking up and all around, almost like it was watching something fly around. Then the cat's eyes fixed on a certain part of the tree, and that's when I looked up and saw it. I don't know what it was, but it was big. Very big. A black silhouette that I cannot describe. Couldn't call it a man or an animal though. It was almost round at the top, like it was crouching over and looking right at us. Its eyes were just white and thin. I couldn't make out any other features given how dark it was. I know I'm not crazy, because my partner saw it as well. I've done so much research since then, talked to so many people who know about things like this, and no one can give me a straight answer. So I came here hoping one of you will know something. What it was, why it was in my backyard, why it was in my tree. Anything really. If you can give me anything, please do. Also, my partner just pointed out something to me that I didn't realise until they pointed out. It was crouching down, like I said, but it almost looked to be in a position like it was ready to leap off of the branch.